The stars were quiet that night. On the edge of human-controlled space, Alaris colony floated like a peaceful dream among the stars. It was known for its green fields, gentle rivers, and calm skies. The people there had built homes, farms, schools, and even a large observatory to study the stars. Children played in open parks. Families sat under the twin moons and looked up at the sky, never thinking danger could come from above. Then came the silence. It started with a broken signal. A weak call from the Alaris communication tower. A message was being sent to Earth. Command, but the words were not clear. Static filled most of it. The last few words that made it through were whispered and scared. We can't breathe. Fire. They are here. Then everything went dark. Earth Command tried again and again to reach Alaris. They sent long-range signals. They pinged the colony's satellites. They even tried contacting personal devices on the ground. But nothing worked. No one answered. It was like the entire colony had disappeared. A team was sent to investigate. A deep space cargo ship named Farsight, already nearby. Its captain, Marcus Wynn, agreed to check on Alaris. He was a brave man, a former Navy officer turned traitor. He had visited Alaris many times. He liked the people there. It was supposed to be a simple stop, but Farsight never reported back. 4 days later, Farsight returned, but barely. It limped through space with 2 engines destroyed and holes ripped through its side. The ship docked at Lunar Base 7 and medical teams rushed inside. What they found shocked them. Captain Marcus was dying. His body was burned, his suit torn. But he was still alive. Barely. They asked him what happened. His eyes stared into space. His voice was weak and cold. "They're all gone," he whispered. "I saw the sky turn black. So many ships. Alaris is gone. No escape. No survivors." Then he stopped breathing. Across Earth and its colonies, a silence fell. People lit candles. News channels spoke softly. Images of Alaris played everywhere. Children laughing, people farming, students walking across the green fields. Now, all of them were gone. But Earth was not broken. It did not cry for long. In the deepest levels of Earth Command, red lights began to blink. A special alert code was activated, one that had not been used for 100 years. It was called Code Hammerfall. A meeting was held in a hidden war room deep beneath the surface of the Andes Mountains. Leaders from every corner of the Human Federation were present. Military officers, scientists, and even old veterans from the last major war. The president of the Federation, a calm woman named Lyra Voss, stood before them. The colony of Alaris, she said, was wiped out. The attackers showed no mercy, no warning, no demands. "We are facing an enemy who believes we are weak." She paused. "They will learn that we are not." A single screen lit up behind her. On it was a black and red symbol. It belonged to an ancient human project, one that had remained hidden for generations. Its name, Project Iron Flame. Across the stars, messages were sent out. To Mars, wake the sleepers. To Jupiter's moons, reactivate the deep vaults. To Neptune's orbit, prepare the Armada. In quiet corners of space, giant steel, doors opened. Forgotten shipyards came to life. Lights flashed inside underground bunkers. Machines began to move, weld, and build. People had thought Earth's great warships were all gone, dismantled after peace was declared decades ago. But they were not. They had only been sleeping, stored in pieces, waiting in hidden places. Now they were waking up. Soldiers were called back from peaceful posts. Pilots were summoned. Engineers were flown in by the thousands. In silence, they worked. No music, no speeches, just steel and fire and engines roaring back to life. Meanwhile, analysts at Earth Command studied the burned symbol found near the wreckage of Alaris. It was alien. Sharp lines, glowing marks, unfamiliar patterns. AI systems compared it with known alien languages and found a match. The attackers were from the Zarkon Empire, a race that lived far beyond the outer human colonies. They were strong, proud, and aggressive. They believed in domination through fear, and they had made a terrible mistake. The humans of Earth had been peaceful for many years. They had explored, built, and shared knowledge. They offered friendship to many alien species, but they had not forgotten how to fight. They had not forgotten what happened to old Earth long ago, when humanity had nearly been destroyed by another alien race. History was about to repeat, but this time humans were ready. From Earth's orbit to the far moons, giant warships began to rise. Long, sharp, powerful. Ships designed not to patrol, but to destroy. The numbers grew. 1,000, 10,000, 100,000. Then more. 700,000 warships, all flying the flag of humanity. The people of Earth did not cheer. They did not celebrate. They only watched with quiet eyes as the sky filled with steel and fire. Children looked up at the dark shapes crossing the stars. Parents whispered, "We remember Alaris." Inside the flagship of the new human fleet, an old admiral stood at the bridge. His name was Admiral Kale Wren. He had seen war before. He had lost friends. He had never wanted to see another battle. But he had also seen Alaris. He had walked its parks. He had spoken at its university. Now, it was gone. He gave one order. Plot the course, set the path for Zarkon space. On another planet far away, a Zarkon commander watched the human response. He laughed. "They send ships. We crush ships. Let them come." But in the corner of the room, an older Zarkon, gray-scaled and quiet, whispered, "You don't understand. You didn't destroy a colony. You woke up something ancient, something that never forgets." And so, the silence of Alaris became the thunder of engines, the roar of weapons, and the fire of revenge. Humanity was coming, not to talk, but to end it. The stars beyond Alaris glowed softly, hiding secrets behind their light. In the dark spaces, between those stars, something was watching. It had seen the silence that fell over Alaris, and now it waited, watching the response from humanity. The Zarkon Empire had existed for centuries. Their borders stretched across systems, and their name brought fear to smaller civilizations. They believed in strength, in power, in striking first. When they attacked Alaris, they did not expect much. To them, Alaris was just a small place, a colony without defenses, a test of human response. They wanted to see how the humans would react when something precious was taken from them. The Zarkon fleet commander, Varnak, stood in his command room, surrounded by glowing screens showing distant stars and quiet planets. He was calm, confident, and pleased. "One colony," he said to his second-in-command. "One message. Now let us see how long they stay quiet." But the humans did not stay quiet. They were not loud either. They moved in silence with focus and fire in their eyes. One by one, hidden shipyards came online. Ancient machines returned to life. Entire fleets assembled, not with noise but with precision. 700,000 ships, each one marked with the same purpose. Varnak watched the data with interest. "A large reaction," he muttered. "But still just humans." His screen blinked. Reports came in, human ships moving faster than expected. Patrol points lost contact. Listening posts stopped sending updates. Then came the scout reports. Short, broken messages filled with confusion. "They're everywhere. Too many. Ships, no warning." Then silence. The human fleet was not moving randomly. It moved like a wave, dark and organized. Each ship had a target. Each target had a reason. The outer systems of the Zarkon Empire, small mining worlds and listening bases, began to disappear one by one. No messages, no distress calls, just quiet. On Earth, Admiral Kale Wren stood on the bridge of the flagship, his eyes on the stars, ahead. "We're not doing this for power," he said to his crew. We're not doing this for fear. We are doing this because we must, because no one will make us helpless again. The crew responded not with cheers, but with quiet nods. Deep, inside the Zarkon Empire, some began to worry. They had studied humans from a distance. They saw a species that laughed, built, and explored. But now they were seeing something different, something colder, more focused. It was not rage they feared, it was resolve. In one of the lost systems, a Zarkon survivor sent out a message, his voice shaking. They don't stop. They don't speak. They just move through the stars like they belong to them. In response, the Zarkon High Council met in secret. They argued. Some laughed at the fear. Some demanded a stronger response. A few sat quietly, their eyes on the silent recordings from the fallen worlds. One council member, old and wise, finally spoke. You believed they were soft. You thought their peace made them weak. But peace was their choice, not their only path. Back on the human flagship, messages poured in. From colonies across human space, volunteers signed up. Young pilots, engineers, medics, and scouts. They wanted to serve. They wanted to protect. They wanted to remember. News stories showed pictures of Alaris before the silence, a child holding a toy ship, a young woman planting trees, a teacher reading under the twin moons. These were the faces behind the mission. These were the lives that would not be forgotten. Humanity was not spreading fire. They were planting warning signs in the stars. Each system they crossed, each base they silenced, left behind a message. We remember. Farnak no longer smiled. He looked at the new data, showing fleet after fleet closing in. He noticed something strange. Humans were not attacking randomly. They were choosing locations with meaning. Places used by the Zarkons to launch silent operations. Secret stations. Unmarked outposts. Somehow the humans knew. How are they finding us? His officer asked. They're listening, Varnak said softly. And they understand more than we thought. The humans didn't just want to respond. They wanted to stop it from happening again, not only to them, but to anyone else. In deep space, where a forgotten station floated in darkness, human forces arrived. Inside, they found prisoners from other species, survivors of past Zarkon attacks. They were freed. Food and care were given. The prisoners looked at their rescuers with confusion. You came back, one asked. No one ever comes back, a human soldier simply said. We do. From that moment, word began to spread across the galaxy. Stories of what had happened to Alaris, stories of what humanity was doing, stories of a people who, when struck, did not hide, but rose. The Zarkon Empire sent a message to Earth, a short, sharp statement. You are entering dangerous space. Earth replied with only 4 words. We are already here. And so the stars no longer looked the same. Where once only a few ships moved, now thousands crossed the sky. They moved without shouting, without pride, without anger. They moved because they had to, because something precious had been taken, and humanity had decided it would not happen again. The stars over Sector 19 shifted ever so slightly, and for those watching closely, it was clear something massive was coming. Dozens of faint glowing lines marked the arrival of a new fleet. These were not just ships, they were stories, memories, promises. They were the answer to a silence no one had expected, a silence that began with Alaris. In the shadows of the Zarkon Empire, many had lived under quiet fear. Small civilizations avoided contact, closed their skies, and moved quietly through their days. The Zarkons had ruled this part of the galaxy with presence alone. Their threats were never loud. Their actions were quick, sharp, and final. And because of that, many believed they were untouchable. But now the rhythm of that fear was broken. The stars were singing a new song carried by engines and light. It was not a song of destruction. It was something deeper. It was the sound of return. The Human Federation had not spoken in loud declarations. They had not claimed land or demanded surrender. Instead, they moved like a tide, clearing paths, rescuing the forgotten, and showing others that silence did not mean defeat. On the edge of the Zarkon perimeter, a human reconnaissance unit discovered an old station drifting near a collapsed star. The station was cold, its systems flickering, but signals still pulsed from its core. Inside were old messages left by survivors who had long since vanished. Some spoke of warning, others of hope, but most simply asked, "Is anyone coming?" Now, someone was. The human fleet paused there not because it needed to, but because it felt right. They restored power to the station, repaired the signal beacons, and left supplies for any future travelers. A small plaque was fixed near the main entrance. It read, "You are not forgotten." Thousands of light years away, in a quiet council chamber deep within Zarkon space, the leaders of the Empire watched these movements with concern. They could no longer say the humans were acting without reason. Every move was planned. Every system visited had meaning. The pattern was clear now. Humans were not pushing to conquer. They were reconnecting. The broken Zarkon commander Varnak paced slowly. He had seen the reports. He had heard the whispers across their own borders. Some Zarkon colonies had begun to question the silence. Messages were leaking in, stories of kindness from the humans, stories of damaged Zarkon scouts being repaired and returned instead of stopped. These actions confused many. What kind of power moves forward without striking first? Back on the human flagship, Admiral Kale Wren studied a star map, lines of movement drawn across a galaxy still holding its breath. The Admiral knew what came next wasn't just about strength, it was about meaning. They weren't just proving a point, they were teaching one. A junior officer approached, holding a message from a distant mining world once under Zarkon control. The people there, mostly non-human, had opened their ports to the humans. They were scared but hopeful. The message was simple. "Your lights reached us. We didn't think anyone would care. But you did." Kale smiled, though his eyes were heavy. He had served for decades, but never had he seen something like this. An entire civilization, uniting not for territory, but for the idea that no one should feel small beneath the stars. At the same time, a different group of humans, scientists, historians, diplomats, traveled alongside the main fleet in protected vessels. Their job wasn't to fight, it was to listen. On each liberated outpost or broken station, they collected data, spoke to survivors, documented memories. One young historian found a damaged notebook near a wrecked settlement. Inside were words written by a child. "They told us not to speak. They said the sky belonged to them, but I dreamed of other stars. I think they're coming," she read. The words aloud on the ship's broadcast, and for a moment across hundreds of vessels, the fleet grew quiet. These moments shaped the mission just as much as the strategy. Because this was not only a response, it was a message to the galaxy. You can be strong without causing fear. You can be brave without taking everything. Far from the main fleet, a small group of Zarkon scouts encountered a human support ship, repairing a communications satellite. Expecting confrontation, the scouts prepared to retreat. But instead they received a message. "This channel is open. We offer repairs and assistance." The Zarkon commander was unsure. This wasn't how enemies acted, and yet the offer was real. They approached slowly, weapons silent. For 2 hours no one spoke. Then the Zarkon ship sent a reply. "Why are you helping us?" The human engineer's response was simple. "Because we don't build walls in the stars. We build bridges." News of this quiet meeting spread faster than any fleet. Whispers reached corners of the Zarkon Empire that had never been questioned before. If humans could walk through the wreckage of their own pain and still offer kindness, then maybe everything the Zarkons believed about strength was missing something. Back on Earth, a child in a classroom watched the updates coming from the fleet. She raised her hand and asked her teacher, "If they fix things and help people, does that mean they win?" The teacher smiled gently. "Sometimes, helping others is the most powerful thing you can do." And so, the human fleet moved forward. Not Faster, not louder, but stronger, not because they wanted to be feared, but because they wanted to be remembered for something greater. Each step they took left behind light, and that light was growing. A strange silence filled the edge of the Veltron expanse. It wasn't the silence of peace nor the emptiness of space. It was a silence filled with anticipation, a sense that something important was about to happen. The stars were watching. And deep among them, the human fleet moved like a great shadow stretching across the void. In a hidden system named Darwin's Reach, the Zarkon Empire had established one of its most secret communication arrays. Protected by a cluster of dense asteroids and a magnetic veil, the station had never been detected until now. Human probes, silent and efficient, had mapped the gravitational shifts, traced the energy signatures, and uncovered the truth. Admiral Cale Wren stood in his observation deck, watching the 3D map of Darvan's Reach spin slowly before him. His officers waited, watching his eyes more than the map. He didn't speak for several seconds. When he did, his voice was calm. "This station doesn't just carry orders," he said. "It listens, records, tracks." He turned toward his crew. "It's how they knew where Alaris was most vulnerable, and how many others were marked for the same silence." Across the fleet, the command was given, but it was not one of aggression. Instead, small ships launched first, observation teams, communication specialists, and signal breakers. The mission was not to shut down the station by force, it was to reveal its secrets. The station itself floated in a gray shroud of static, disguised to blend with the rock around it. The few Zarkan technicians on board were unaware of how close humanity had come. One technician, young and curious, noticed a strange pattern in the static, small signals spaced like musical notes. She leaned closer and realized it was a message, not a command, not a threat, just a quiet line of words in Galactic common, "We hear you." She froze. Human listening ships had been broadcasting these quiet messages through encrypted frequencies. They weren't meant to scare. They were meant to reach those who might be ready to listen. Back on the human fleet, a historian named Corin Lane was reviewing data from Alaris. Not just maps and numbers, but stories, recovered journals, audio clips, school records, even music. His goal was not strategy. It was understanding. "This isn't about who wins," he said to his fellow researchers. "It's about who remembers." He found a short audio clip of a child reading a poem, recorded just 2 days before the loss of Alaris. The child's voice was small but hopeful. "I saw a light beyond the trees. It danced alone but not afraid. I wished it well and let it be, and hoped it found the friends it made." Corin uploaded the poem to the fleet's public channels. It played between messages, quietly filling the space between alerts. No one was ordered to listen, but they did. Meanwhile, in the Zarkon High Council chambers, confusion was growing. Reports showed that the humans were not targeting weapons or command centers. They were uncovering hidden listening posts, old surveillance stations, and secret files. They were collecting, not destroying. One council member finally said aloud, what many feared to admit: "They're rewriting the story." In many Zarkon systems, local governors were quietly turning off sensors, refusing to track the human fleet. Some ships had even stopped sending reports entirely, not out of fear, but out of a quiet respect. They had begun to realize that the humans were not moving to conquer. They were moving to reclaim the truth. At Darwin's Reach, the human signal team entered the station's outer zone. They sent another message. "We don't want silence. We want clarity." To the surprise of the human team, the young Zarkon technician replied, "I'm listening." Her reply reached the flagship, and for the first time in the campaign, a live connection was opened between human and Zarkon forces. No weapons were raised, no threats exchanged. Only a conversation began. A conversation about what had happened, what was taken, and what might come next. Admiral Wren approved a limited crew transfer. One human envoy was allowed on the station, escorted but not restrained. He walked calmly through the halls, observing not enemies, but people, scientists, workers, staff, not soldiers. They showed him files. He showed them recovered memories. From Alaris. For hours, they spoke. not to argue, but to understand. Word of this quiet meeting reached both sides quickly, and from it, a new rhythm began. Several Zarkon systems opened neutral channels. Civilian vessels were given safe passage. A medical unit from Earth delivered supplies to a sick colony previously left behind by both sides. At the edge of human space, a former Zarkon ambassador sent a personal message to Earth. Your actions speak louder than your ships. Kale Ren stood alone later that day, looking at the stars once more. He remembered the early days when they had first launched after the loss of Alaris. The mission had felt simple then: respond, defend, prevent. But now it was changing. It was about memory, it was about truth, and it was about building something that couldn't be hidden behind fear. A communication from one of the newly visited colonies came through. It was short, simple. We thought no one would come, but you came quietly, and you listened. That was enough. So the fleet continued. Not to take, not to erase, but to reveal. With every movement, the silence faded, and in its place, something far stronger was growing. Understanding. A deep calm had settled over the vast stretches of space where the human fleet now moved, but beneath that calm was a growing current of determination. The loss of Alaris was no longer just a distant memory. It was a living call to action that echoed through every ship, every crew member, every voice in the fleet. They were no longer reacting. They were building a future. On board the flagship, Admiral Kale Ren stood before a panoramic view of the stars. The light shimmered like scattered diamonds, but beneath their beauty was the harsh reality of what had been lost, and what had yet to be saved. The fleet was larger now, more coordinated, and their mission clearer than ever. Not just to respond to the silence of Alaris, but to ensure it never happened again. In the dimly lit conference room, officers gathered around a holographic map. Points of interest blinked steadily, former colonies, hidden stations, and star systems waiting to be touched by the fleet's presence. But it was not about conquest or control. It was about connection. Each point was a promise, a story waiting to be told. A young communications officer, Leah, was tasked with coordinating the outreach programs. We're not just fighting with ships, she said softly. We're fighting for trust, for hope. She looked over at the fleet's cultural liaison, an older woman named Dr. Malin, who nodded in agreement. Every place we visit, every person we meet, our stories must be stronger than their fears. Their work was already making waves. In systems long isolated by conflict and fear, people began to open doors. Marketplaces buzzed with new energy. Children played beneath unfamiliar skies. Messages from liberated colonies spoke of relief, of beginnings, not endings. One such message came from a small outpost called Viora Station. The station had been silent for months before human ships arrived. Its inhabitants were wary, but the II crew of the human ship Horizon brought supplies, repaired power systems, and most importantly, they listened. A teacher at Viora sent a simple broadcast back to the fleet. We had forgotten what kindness felt like. Your presence is a light we thought lost. As the fleet moved forward, not all encounters were easy. Some worlds still held doubts, scars too fresh to trust. In those moments, patience was the most powerful tool. The fleet's diplomats never rushed, never demanded. They waited, talked, and shared. Meanwhile, in the distant heart of the Zarkon Empire, change was quietly stirring. Not all leaders accepted the new reality. Some still clung to old fears and rigid control, but others began to see the value in dialogue, in learning from the human's approach. Quiet meetings happened in shadowed chambers. Old rivalries softened when faced with something unexpected, the human capacity for healing. A former Zarkon captain, now acting as a liaison, spoke to the fleet's command. We once believed strength was only in power, she said. Now I see it in openness. Back on the flagship, Kale received a message that filled the room with quiet hope. A previously isolated colony had sent word. They wished to join the Federation. Their reasons were simple. safety, friendship, and the promise of a new beginning. The admiral turned to his crew. "This is what we fight for, not domination, but unity. Not fear, but trust." A historian on board, Corin Lane, reflected on the journey so far. "When we first launched, it was about responding to loss. Now, it is about creating memory. Memory that lasts beyond stars and ships." Elsewhere, the fleet's engineers worked tirelessly. Old stations were repaired and repurposed as centers of learning and communication. Scientists exchanged knowledge with former rivals. The galaxy, once fractured, began to weave threads of cooperation. One young pilot, Mira, recorded a message that spread quickly through the fleet. "We are more than warriors. We are builders of peace." Each step forward is a promise, to those who lost homes, to those who still hope. As the fleet continued its journey, stories grew. Stories of rescue, rebuilding, and unexpected friendship. Stories of species once divided, now standing side by side. Each star system touched by the fleet added a new verse to the growing song of unity. The stars no longer held fear in their depths. Instead, they carried the light of countless lives reaching out, connecting, and healing. And amid the quiet hum of engines and whispers of new beginnings, humanity showed the galaxy what it truly meant to rise from silence, not with force, but with hope. The human fleet had grown from a flicker in the dark to a blazing constellation moving steadily through the galaxy. What began as a response to loss had become a mission of renewal. Every ship, every voice, every light in the vastness of space carried a promise that no silence would ever go unanswered again. As the fleet approached the outer edges of the former Zarkon territory, whispers of their journey reached even the most distant worlds. Some listened with hope, others with caution, but all knew the tide was changing. On the bridge of the flagship, Admiral Cale Wren stood quietly, his gaze fixed on the swirling patterns of a nearby nebula. Behind him, the bridge crew worked with calm precision, their faces reflecting a mix of exhaustion and determination. Months had passed since the fleet first set out, yet the mission's meaning only deepened. A message arrived from a remote colony known as Ilara's Rest. It was brief, but filled with feeling. "Your fleet brought the stars back to us. We are ready." This was more than a simple declaration. It was a turning point. Ilara's Rest had been silent for years, isolated and forgotten. Its people had struggled to survive, their hope dimmed by the shadow of the past. But now they reached out not with fear but with an open hand. Admiral Wren called his senior officers together. The room hummed with quiet energy. Plans were made, not for battle, but for welcome. Supplies, educators, healers, and engineers would soon arrive to help rebuild and connect. Meanwhile, the human fleet continued to open doors across the galaxy. Former rivals became partners. Communications hubs once dark now buzzed with new signals. A network of shared knowledge and culture began to take shape, linking stars and species in ways thought impossible. A young historian, Corin Lane, recorded his thoughts from the flagship's observatory. "We carry memories not as burdens but as bridges. Each story shared is a thread in the fabric of something greater than any one world." The human way was clear. Strength was not measured by conquest but by the ability to heal and unite. Far from the front line, in the heart of the Zarkon Empire, change was stirring. The old council had fractured. New voices spoke of peace and cooperation. The realization dawned that survival was not in silence and control, but in understanding and shared futures. An unexpected envoy from Zarkon approached the human fleet with a simple message. "We seek a new beginning." Admiral Wren welcomed the envoy personally, recognizing the importance of this moment. It was proof that even the deepest divides could be bridged. Back on the fleet, children from liberated colonies learned together, sharing stories and dreams, beneath artificial stars aboard community ships. Artists painted, musicians played, and scientists exchanged discoveries. The fleet was no longer just a force, it was a moving home. One pilot, Mira, wrote in her journal, We are more than explorers. We are storytellers. Each world we touch adds a new verse to the song we sing. The stars no longer felt cold or distant. They shimmered with possibility, with hope, with connection. As the fleet prepared to establish the first permanent federation, outpost beyond the old borders, Admiral Wren looked out once more. The vast galaxy stretched endlessly before them, full of unknowns, but also full of promise. The silence that once followed loss had been replaced by a chorus, a living, breathing testament to resilience and unity. The mission was no longer just about responding to tragedy. It was about creating a future where no voice would be lost in the dark. And so, the fleet moved forward, not as warriors, but as bearers of light, carrying the hope of many stars, for many worlds, and many generations to come.